So, when you think of Martin Luther, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's that classic image, right? The serious-looking monk, hammer in hand, nailing 95 complaints to a church door. It's this epic moment of defiance. But here's the thing. That one act, as iconic as it is, doesn't even scratch the surface of how he actually changed the world. To really get it, we have to look past the hammer and start listening to his voice.
See, the real revolution wasn't one with a hammer and a handful of nails. No, it was one with something way more powerful, something he used with just incredible skill. So, the big question is, what was his most powerful weapon? Trust me, it's probably not what you're thinking.
The real battle for the Reformation, it was won with words. It was a communication victory. And we're about to dive into the three totally distinct but deeply connected voices Luther used to make his ideas not just, understood, but really felt in the hearts of everyday people.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about his most public voice, the voice of the preacher. For Luther, the sermon was everything. I mean, everything. The pulpit was the absolute engine of change. It's where all that lofty theology actually hit the street.
And his commitment to this was just mind-blowing. We have over 2,300 of his sermons that have survived to this day. Just think about that number. At his busiest, he was preaching almost every other day, sometimes 4 times on a single Sunday. This wasn't some side gig for him. It was a full-on, relentless campaign to teach and to fire people up.
And when he was up there, his tone had this incredible range. He was not a one-note speaker. Not at all. He could be this tender, gentle shepherd one minute and then a roaring lion the next, sometimes in the very same sermon.
I mean, you can just feel the warmth here, can't you? This was to a fellow preacher who felt like a total failure. And Luther doesn't judge him. He just offers this kind, practical advice. He gets it. He understood how heavy that responsibility could be, and he knew just how to comfort a struggling soul. And then there was this Luther. Wow, this furious explosion was aimed right at his own congregation in Wittenberg. And you want to know why? Because they were complaining about having to pay 4 pennies for the upkeep of the church. 4 pennies! He could flip from deep empathy to just righteous fury in a heartbeat.
But maybe his real superpower as a preacher was his storytelling. He didn't just retell Bible stories, he basically threw his listeners right into the middle of the action. His Sermon on the Nativity, it is an absolute masterclass in making an ancient story feel like it's happening right now.
He starts by painting this really gritty, almost undignified picture. He wants his audience to feel the cold, the rejection, the shame of it all. This is not some beautiful, calm Christmas card scene. No, this is a raw human drama, and it's unfolding in a dirty stable.
And then he does something absolutely brilliant. He knows what his listeners are thinking. Oh, if I was there, I would have helped. And he just flips it right back on them. Bam! He closes a 2,000-year gap in an instant, challenging them to see Christ not in some historical diorama, but in the person right in front of them who needs their help.
And after all that fire, all that challenging, he always brings it back to this message of pure comfort. This was his whole method, this dynamic dance between accusation and consolation, designed to kind of break people down before building them right back up with hope.
And this whole dynamic of breaking down and building up, that also totally defined his second voice, the voice of the teacher. In the university classroom, Luther wasn't just, lecturing on doctrine. He was dissecting the human soul.
And a concept that was absolutely central to his teaching was this word, Anfechtung. It's a German word, and it's kind of hard to translate perfectly, but it's that terrifying spiritual attack, those waves of doubt, despair, guilt, the feeling that God has totally abandoned you. And Luther, he knew this feeling from the inside out. And this is a perfect example of how he used Scripture to map it all out for his students. He looked at the story of Jonah not as just some ancient tale, but as this timeless psychological roadmap through Anfechtung. He broke Jonah's entire ordeal down into these clear stages of a spiritual crisis, from running away from God to literally being swallowed by the depth. For Luther, this right here was the turning point. When you're at rock bottom, literally in the belly of the whale, victory isn't some big heroic act. It's just a cry. The second you can turn your despair into a prayer, even if it's a wordless one, you've already won the battle. He taught that the way through despair wasn't to fight it, but to cry out from the very heart of it. And that leads us perfectly into his third and most intimate voice, the voice of prayer. This is where we get to see the man behind the public masks, the private Luther, all alone before his God.
You know, after hearing about the thundering preacher and the brilliant lecturer, you might expect his prayers to be just full of confidence and power. But they weren't, not at all. They show us a man who felt deeply unworthy and completely, utterly dependent on grace.
Just listen to the words here. There's no bargaining. He's not listing his achievements. It's just a simple, humble plea for mercy. He's asking God to basically ignore whether they've been good or bad and just give them mercy they haven't earned. This private humility, well, that was the very foundation for all his public confidence.
So, what happens when you put all three of these voices together? Well, you get a revolution. And not just in theology, but a revolution in communication itself.
And this really gets us to the most important takeaway of all. These weren't three different Luthers. The passion of the preacher, the psychological insight of the teacher, and the humility of the man in prayer, it all flowed from the exact same source. His real power was his authenticity. He preached what he taught, and he prayed what he preached. It was all one.
And what he leaves us with is a kind of blueprint for influence that is just as relevant today as it was 500 years ago. Think about it. Speak with genuine passion. Use powerful imaginative stories. Connect the big, abstract ideas to people's daily lives. Don't be afraid to show both deep empathy and righteous anger. And above all else, make sure your public message is anchored in your private convictions. Be authentic.
Which brings us to one last question to chew on. In the story of Martin Luther, we have this incredibly powerful message, but it was delivered by a complex, passionate, and deeply human messenger. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? In the end, what's the thing that truly changes the world? Is it the idea itself, or is it the authentic voice that finally gives it life?